Divorce happens. In fact, it happens to almost 50% of first marriages. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Divorce Happens, a podcast to educate, inspire, support, and yes, make you laugh through divorce and beyond so that you can start fresh on the next phase of your journey. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh.
You'll get divorced. You'll get divorced.
Getting divorced?
I'm getting a divorce.
You're getting a divorce.
Because she's getting a divorce.
So what if I get divorced?
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Divorce Happens, the show where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, inspiration, and a little bit of laughter. Because as you know, divorce happens and then you start fresh. We're here with one of our amazing Fresh Starts experts, Allison. Allison, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Olivia. I work with people going through divorce, right? So my background is as a family law attorney, and I left that kind of traditional legal practice because I really wanted to focus on helping people reach agreements outside of court. I saw as an attorney so many people who would come to me hoping that they could reach an agreement, but we were already in that litigation phase. And so it just felt impossible to them, right? And so what I do now is work with people before they get to that impossible phase where there's still that possibility of reaching those resolutions outside of court.
Which I am so excited to talk to you today. One of the questions I get a lot from people who are considering divorce is, I don't think I can afford it. It seems super overwhelming. I don't want to go to court. And I have to remind people, most divorces, unless I'm wrong, really don't end up in the courtroom, right? So why do people not use mediation more? It's such a great option. Like, what are your opinions there?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. The vast majority of folks end up reaching agreements outside of court. Like the statistics vary, but anywhere from up to 95% of people reach agreements outside of court, right? But I think a lot of people don't know how to get to that point. And for some people, they've never even heard of mediation. Mediation's like a relatively new idea, and it's not the default that a lot of people think of. It's not what you see on TV. You see people hiring lawyers and duking it out in a courtroom, right? And they think it's like it's not going to work when they do hear about mediation and the idea of, okay, well, I've tried to talk to my spouse. I've tried to reach an agreement with them. They're unreasonable. We're not going to be able to. And the difference with mediation is that this is like a structured process, right? It's not just you and your spouse kind of getting caught in those same arguments, those same breakdowns of communication, those same patterns. But it's a process where the mediator is also helping guide those conversations. And, the mediator generally has an idea of what needs to go into those divorce agreements. And so they're able to help guide you through the topics that the court needs in order to get that divorce without going in front of the judge. And also to help you maybe stay away from some of those topics that are just focused on the past and are more so like rehashing some of those old arguments. So it's another opportunity. It's a whole different process than just negotiating one-on-one with your spouse. And I think that's really important for people to understand that you can get a neutral professional involved. You can get a mediator involved without escalating things to the level of having attorneys fighting, without it becoming that adversarial process. And the fees when you reach an agreement through mediation are I would say almost nominal compared to what litigation fees can look like. And the other thing I hear a lot from folks is that they're worried about being taken advantage of, which is a common fear. And for a lot of folks, I think it shows up because they just have a lack of knowledge or understanding. For most people, you don't learn about divorce. You don't you don't know what's going to happen. You don't understand what you could possibly get out of it. You don't know what the range of possibilities are. And so people are worried, if I go to mediation and reach an agreement, I'll get taken advantage of. And there's ways around that too, right? Like there's levels of support that you can get from professionals like attorneys to talk to you about what might happen if you go to court, financial professionals to talk about what some of the different options are, how you can set yourself up for financial success in the future. So being able to pull in those outside resources to address some of those fears, I think it's important for people to understand that those options are still available to you even during the mediation process.
Yeah, I love that. So, for anybody listening that's like, I didn't know this was an option, this is so interesting. Can you explain to me, like I'm a kindergartner, what mediation is actually?
Yeah. So it's a facilitated conversation, right? Think about the mediator. They're a neutral third party. You can almost think of them as like a referee, right? Insofar as they're not saying you're right, you're wrong, but they're keeping the conversation on track. They're making sure that whatever you've decided the goals are for that conversation, that that's what's being focused on. So when you go into a mediation session with a mediator, everybody has a different style, but generally, what you can expect is that the mediator is going to want to hear from you. You're going to want to hear from you and your spouse as to why you're there. What are the issues that you want to talk about? What are your proposals as to how you want to resolve these issues? So I think sometimes people are surprised by how much of the conversation is driven by them. And preparing for those mediation sessions, knowing that you really are the driving force in them, I think is important as well and can be one of the things that really increases the success or the likelihood of success in mediation is having an understanding of how I should prepare for those sessions. What do I need to do? What questions am I going to be asked? And I always tell people to take notes. When I'm mediating with clients, I give them a checklist ahead of time of here's some of the common issues that sometimes come up so that you guys can start talking about them.
Mm,
And I think it's helpful when you're in the middle of mediation. We're talking about so many things. It's easy to forget things. It's easy to get off track. And having those notes in front of you so that you're prepared to address the issues, as well as being prepared to address some of those emotional triggers that are likely to come up. Like a lot of these conversations, whether we're talking about the kids or the family house, it's emotional. There's going to be things that your ex is going to say that's going to make you want to just scream, right?
mhm.
And so knowing that and being prepared for how you're going to handle that makes a big difference in how those mediation sessions go. The
Yeah.
other thing I'd say in terms of like what is mediation, right? I think that you can ask the mediator. What part of this is generally speaking, even if you end up in litigation, the court's going to send you to mediation at some point. That is the trend and what the vast majority of courts are doing nowadays. And so you're going to end up in mediation anyways. But if the court sends you, it's likely to be with somebody that you didn't choose. It's going to be at a date and time that the court says you have to go see this person, as opposed to being able to schedule something on your own timeline, taking into account your work schedule, choosing somebody that you feel familiar or that you feel comfortable with, right? So part of that is if you decide to go to mediation before you get into court, you can choose your mediator. You can talk to them and say, what does your process look like? When I mediate with people, I usually start with 2-hour sessions. Like I think that that's a good amount of time, right? So some mediators want to do it for longer sessions. And some people say, hey, I want to knock it out in a day, right? Is that a possibility? So talking to the mediator, seeing how they normally work, is their ability do they mediate in person? Do they mediate over Zoom? Like figuring out kind of what the different options are and thinking about what works best for you and finding a mediator who then is able to fit into some of those categories as opposed to you being just assigned to a mediator who's you
Yeah.
know, doesn't know anything about you, doesn't know anything about, and you don't know anything about them or the way that, you want to work.
Yeah, I think that was one of the benefits I was going to ask you about, which is like working with a mediator before court, you get to really design a divorce, right? That's much more customized for your family and your lifestyle opposed to being assigned a judge who doesn't know you or a mediator who doesn't know you. So what if you're with somebody and you're like listening to this episode and you're like, Allison's so smart. I want to work with her. She's a great mediator. but my soon to be ex is skeptical of mediators. What would you say if your soon to be ex does not want to mediate, but you know it's going to be the best outcome?
Yeah. So I think one avenue to potentially take is to start by having a conversation of what do they want to get out of the divorce. They're saying they don't want to mediate. Well, what is it that they do want? And try to see if you can use some of those things that they might highlight as important to them to kind of to push the mediation. Like if they verbalize or tell you that it's important that the kids stay in the same house so that they can go to the same schools. You can maybe talk to them about the fact that mediation allows you to come up with a creative solution that would enable that. First, going to court where a judge might have the only option a judge might have might be to say we have to sell the house. So there might be like certain issues or topics that you can talk about. You might also be able to talk to them about the fact that we can do this on our own timeline, right? We can decide how quickly we're going to go to mediation. We can decide when we want the sessions to be. You get to also preserve some of those funds, right? Before you get into court, before you're spending money on attorneys, being able to mediate early on is often something that's helpful. I think another piece that you might have to kind of sell this process to them. So the fact that it might save them money, the fact that you get to have the benefits of privacy. I think another thing sometimes people like the idea of it's worked for somebody else. So if you know somebody who's used mediation before and that they've resolved their divorce that way, and you can say to them, hey, our friends or our family members did this and it worked out great for them, or even the opposite, right? Like I don't want
Mhm.
to end up in a situation like our friends who, are still paying attorneys to go back and forth over this. So some of that social proof that maybe you can pull in to point to them, because mediation, again, like this is kind of a foreign concept for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And so I think also the idea that the first time you bring it up, if they say no or that they're not interested, that not to lose hope, that there's still the possibility that down the line they might realize the benefits and be on board. I think also involving them in the process of, hey, these are the reasons why I want to do mediation. There's all these mediators that we can choose from. Like, here's some people that I'm interested in. Why don't you go and talk to them? A lot of people offer no charge consultations, right? So you can talk to them. You can find out this information about their style, about how they're going to approach your situation before
Mhm.
you make that commitment.
Mhm.
And so there is some legwork on your part, right, in terms of finding out that information and providing it, or having your spouse or your ex telling them, asking them to go and look into it. But it can all, in the long run, the after they get some information after, and it also still, again, you might end up in mediation if you're in litigation anyways, right? And so
Right.
taking advantage of that opportunity on your end, that you come to mediation prepared, ready to negotiate, focused on reaching a resolution so that it can still be beneficial, even if it didn't happen as early on as you wanted it to.
Yeah, and I would assume too, when you can begin the divorce process kind of on this like neutral territory, it's got to make the whole process a little bit easier for the family and the co-parenting, if that's something you're going to be doing, much much easier just down the line because you're not going into this fighting in the same way that you would necessarily in a court, litigated case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of folks ending up in court, sometimes it's the only option, right?
Mhm.
And it does really harm the long-term relationships though when you've been put into that adversarial relationship, and kind of ag- pitted against each other in the way that you often do, in a court case. And
Yeah.
so if you're able to cut some of that off, if you're
Right.
able to at least try mediation early on. I think the other thing to think about is that it doesn't have to be a win-lose situation. You go to mediation, you might be able to resolve some things, right? And then you might have to go to court on one or two things, or you might have
Mm.
to get attorneys and you might resolve those things later
Yep.
on. But a lot of people come and they use mediation to as part of like that initial agreement. We're in the same house. How are we going to separate? How are we going to survive for the next couple months so that we don't have these continuous, outbursts and conflict that
Right.
everybody wants to avoid having? So I think looking at it as a kind of like a starting point and the idea that you can take this process, you can use it to resolve some things. A lot of people will come and they want to talk about things involving their kids and improving communication. And it's not therapy. We're not diving into the issues from the relationship, but we are talking about what the plan is for the future and trying to
Right.
problem solve some of the things that we anticipate might come up down the line.
Which is why they say no two divorces are ever the same, right? Because there's so many things that you cover. This was such fantastic advice. We're going to have you back on I want you to dive even deeper into mediation and have you come back on to really walk us through the entire, like, what does it look like to go to mediation? Because I know, a little bit different for everybody. I did mediation and then we ended up having our lawyers figure out the rest, but we never went to court. And it was, was it stressful? Absolutely. But was there people handling it for us also? And we didn't have to, deal with it each other? Yes. And mediation ended up being great. So, probably saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we'll have you back to get into that.
I think that's important, Olivia. Like mediation isn't necessarily an easy choice, right? Like mediation,
Yeah.
the process is still hard. Nobody's gonna like wave their magic wand and
Right.
you guys are gonna reach an agreement. But the benefits of it are great if you are able
Yeah.
to tap into it.
Yeah, and I will say too, like, we changed mediators 3 times. Like, we started with one person, then we went to another. We ended up, even just taking the final stipulation and then having our individual lawyers kinda hash it out. And that I consider it mediation. And, again, that's different than other people do it, but it worked for us. And I think you made a really good point where it's sometimes you do solve some problems and get some solutions, and then you have to go to court. Maybe it's for the house, or maybe it's for a sticking point with custody, but it's not going to be hopefully starting from zero when you start with mediation, which is nice. Well, we appreciate you. How do you work? Where do you work? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I mediate for folks all over. I offer virtual mediation. I'm located in Maryland, so I also do in-person mediations for folks in Maryland. To schedule that initial call with me so we can talk more about the mediation process, I have a Calendly link for you to go ahead and schedule that at no charge. You can visit my website, www.divorcedbyallison.com, where I have some more information about my process, and it includes that link to schedule a time as well.
Awesome. And of course, you can find Allison over at Fresh Starts and the Expert Guide and go schedule a call with her. We send so many people her way because she is so fantastic and grounding and helps people really, with those huge steps that they're taking to the next phase. Alice, before we let you go, if somebody's listening to this and they're feeling very confused and flustered and overwhelmed about the whole process, what would be something that you could tell them?
I think if you take a couple steps back, right, and focus on what that end goal is, what you want that the end result, what you are envisioning, what you're working towards, and keeping that in mind, right, and giving yourself some grace in terms of getting there and the fact that this takes time. I've spoken to thousands and thousands of people, as has Olivia, and I don't
Mhm.
think I've ever heard anybody say that they weren't overwhelmed. And so what you're feeling is normal, I guess, would maybe be the one thing I would really want to drive home, that where you are, that many people have been in that place and they've come out on the other side in a wonderful place. And so you're not alone in how you're feeling.
Amazing advice. Thank you so much, Allison. We appreciate you, and we're so happy and grateful that you are part of our community. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. And I look forward to having another conversation.
Yes, we're going to dive deeper. Thanks, Allison. Divorce Happens is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the only divorce registry platform for everything you need to begin again, including home items, hype team, and everything in between. Remember, divorce happens and then we start fresh. We're here to support you before, during, and after divorce. Head to freshstartsregistry.com for more info.